Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm John Lester. I'm the general manager of Clarkesville Light and Water. I feel honored to be in front of this group. We're a very, very small municipal utility. I'm going to tell you about that here in a minute. But we want to talk specifically about a project we completed recently and some of the future projects we're possibly looking at as a city. So I'm going to briefly cover what type of services we provide, talk a little bit about the SCADA system and the communications network we built, along with implementing some of the technology, which Brown Engineers was critical in that process. And it's always fun to share our story, and I think Dee enjoys sharing this story, and hopefully for you, you could potentially be my customer, so I want you to know that little Clarkesville, Arkansas is open for business. So. Next slide. Okay, we're a municipally owned utility. We've been around over 100 years. 1913 is when it was formed. It's an electric, water, and wastewater utility, and now a fiber utility. The community population is around 10,000. However, our water utility, we have 8 wholesale water customers, so we add another 18,000 for that. Essentially, our focus is not Wall Street, but Main Street, Clarksville. Our purpose is to add value to the community. We're not necessarily a profit-driven entity. Now, we want to have a fair return on our investment, obviously, or we can't continue to make improvements. But one of the things I like to point out to people is if you think about how communities have developed over the years, there is key utility or infrastructure in place in order to help that development. 100 years ago, it was water. Most communities were placed along a water source. And then 150 years ago, it was rail. The last 100 years was electricity. In fact, what Clarksville decided 100 years ago is when the large incumbent utility, investor-owned utility, didn't necessarily want to serve the community, they felt like it was important enough to step up and do it themselves. Well, also, 50 years ago was the interstate system, and you can see how communities have grown over the years. And I think, and many of my brethren, we have 200 or 2,000 municipal utilities, electric utilities across the country, feel like internet and broadband is just as important as electric was 100 years ago. So some of the things we're going to talk about really is aimed at a small town can be pretty forward-thinking as well when it comes to considering and implementing technologies. Here's the situation. I was a new guy in July of 2013. I was previously a city manager in another city. I wanted to come work for a separate board, so I don't deal directly with politicians anymore. So that's a wonderful thing. But I do have a utility board. I've been there since, again, July 2013. And you can imagine a small town in Arkansas was not necessarily the most technically savvy in the world. In fact, they had taken a run at implementing a SCADA system for our water utility, and frankly, it kind of fizzled out, okay? So I had basically no SCADA systems in place, and I very much had a culture of, the old way works just fine. Well, it may work just fine, but we also have some high-powered industrial customers that don't think that way. So I had to think of things that we could do to add value to their efforts. So the complication was I had a manager over a water utility who had experienced the fizzled previous SCADA effort, so he was skeptical. My electric system had nothing in place, which is almost unheard of today. Then we had the question when we started looking at what we needed to do and the infrastructure we needed in place, we needed a way to transport it. And are there any incumbent telephone providers or cable TV providers, broadband providers? Okay. They're not the most easy to work with in the world. Plus, I think if we started utilizing their infrastructure, that monthly bill would have gone over and over and over again. Obviously, cybersecurity and reliability is critical as an electric and water utility, and change is just plain hard, especially when you have a lot of folks who've been with the utility, born and raised in Clarksville, Arkansas for 25, 35 years, and plus, I mean, this is a pretty healthy investment for a community our size. So for the board, it was kind of a risky thing, and I had to kind of begin to transform a culture. So the resolution was I had to start at ground zero and kind of introducing the concepts. and I had to provide some vision and leadership for the board. One of the good things about not having in this place and being the new guy is I had that grace period of about 12 months. So I had a lot of conversations in those first 12 months that set the stage for others. Investments needed to be made. We had a very healthy balance sheet. In fact, it was easy to make the argument in today's world, it's time to make these investments because our investment in CDs is earning us practically nothing, 0.0001% it seemed like. So now is the time to invest in the infrastructure. When we started looking at the project seriously, we wanted to make sure we begin with the end in mind. So we wanted to build it so there were long-term implications for it. What you see here is this map to the right, okay? That shows our fiber network that we have constructed. The yellow highlighted areas are strands of 288 count fiber. So there's lots and lots of capacity. And I'll talk about why we did that. This shows some of the electronics we put in, and some of the routes that we chose were strategic. Not only did we need to connect our critical infrastructure, but with the capabilities of the fiber network offered, we could provide services over the top of it. So about 90% of the businesses we passed. So after some heavy lifting with the board, they gave me the approval to do some heavy lifting when it comes to major technology upgrades and building a foundation for future things, okay? They allowed me to build a fiber network, which has about 16.7 miles with 288 strands. Frankly, when I carved out the 48 for us, that's more than we would ever need. But the reality of it is, with the fiber, it's about the labor to put it up, not the number of strands in the cable. So it made sense just to overbuild, to give us extra capacity to do other things. We also wanted to do it in a way that was highly reliable. So we built it in redundant rings. So if there is a severance in service at a particular location, we would have equipment on there that we'd reroute it for redundancy. And then we interconnected all of our facilities, substations, water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, and our office locations. The other thing that we needed to do was one of my supervisors or managers was really pleased with me when he lost his office at operations. I moved him down to the main office, and we created a NOC in our operations center. Our operations center is where all our field staff is, all electric distribution folks and crews and all the equipment. So I've got a graphic on that in the next page. So we basically took this area of our operations center and converted that into a NOC, okay? So in that NOC, we built to the left area where you see the fiber racks. We built that room so it could you could access that with a card key. And if at some point in time we decided to partner with a provider over the top of our network to provide services, they could access that room. In the middle is kind of a SCADA monitoring room. And at the end, it just so happens when we bought this building 20 years ago, it was an old machine shop. And so they had a hardened vault in there to protect all of their drawings that they had for their customers. So I now have a hardened vault to put all of our head-end electronics in. So, go ahead. And then the last part of the heavy lifting was the implementation of the SCADA system and the electronics. We ultimately chose Ignition. There were a couple of reasons for that. We loved the idea of the open architecture. I also loved the idea that I could use it for all three utilities. Historically, what I found is there is a SCADA specialist in the electric industry and in the water and wastewater, and none communicated across platforms. So this is why I liked Ignition quite a bit. It was reasonable as far as the tags. Again, it was open, and I liked the idea that we could actually operate our devices from anywhere, including smartphones and iPads. Since we're an electric utility, we're not really under SIP compliance as far as FERC is concerned, but it's just a matter of time before we will get there. Our voltage, transmission voltage is 69 kV. So we just decided, let's do it the right way. Let's make sure we do everything we can as far as hardware and software to make it as cyber secure as we can make it. And we're going to implement it across all three utilities. The water utility happened first. The electric utility's in process, and we built just the foundation on the electric utility. And wastewater is in the future. But the other utility I've got sitting out there now that I have all this fiber hanging in the air is a possible internet service, TV service, broadband related service, okay? One of the visions that we had when we started putting this network together, when we looked at the economies and what the tools could be, keep in mind I'm here to benefit Main Street, not Wall Street. We thought that there was things that we could do to add value to the community beyond being the electric utility and providing reliable, low-cost electric and water, okay? We thought if we had this in place, why not dedicate some tubes or strands specifically to anchor institutions? And what I mean by that is other government offices, public safety type entities, school districts. We also have a college in the town, healthcare. And we've started carving up some of those things. In fact, our very first customer on the broadband side was our hospital, and we did a dark fiber arrangement with another provider. They put the electronics on it and lit it up, and we gave them access to the entire ring. In return for that, I got really cheap bandwidth. But what I'd like to point out is I still have, after dedicating all those tubes and fibers, I still have 192 left. That's a lot of capacity. In fact, what I think is, as the industrial Internet of Things moves on farther and farther, I can be that middle mile transport that a lot of providers don't necessarily want to do. And I can get it to you really fast. So I think that we can help this technology, leverage this technology, not just for us, but our customers, because frankly, the other place we need to get to is the preventive maintenance and the predictive maintenance. When I have downtime, you guys have downtime. And I know you don't like that. So the top of the next portions on top of that foundation is what kind of things can we do on top of that fiber network beyond our controller to look out into the field to help manage and operate it better. So that's my piece in a nutshell. I'll turn it over to Dee.